You know that walk. Late August, cup of coffee, back door open, and you just stop at the threshold. You look at the garden for maybe 3 seconds and you go back inside. Not because you gave up on it, because it gave up on you somewhere around the 4th of July and you are still not quite over it. You spent money out there, real money, flats of annuals, a few perennials from the garden center, maybe a bag of slow-release fertilizer you felt good about. And right now, that garden looks like a real estate photo from October. Sparse, sun-scorched at the edges, technically alive, but not doing anything you'd call blooming. And there are still 8 full weeks of growing season left. Here is what I want you to understand before we get into the plants. This is not your fault. This is not bad soil. This is not forgetting to water during that stretch in July. This is a plant selection problem. Specifically, the problem of choosing plants that are designed to look spectacular in June, because that is when you buy them, at the height of their performance, in a garden center full of other plants also performing their absolute best. The whole system is calibrated to the shopping moment, not the August moment. And there are 7 perennials that solve this permanently. Plants that bloom from early summer through the first hard frost, come back every year stronger than the last, and cost you money exactly once. Let's get into them. The first plant most gardeners think they know is Coreopsis. Tickseed. Common name, cheerful daisy-like flowers, usually yellow, usually found in the discount bin by mid-June. And most gardeners plant it, enjoy it for a few weeks, and then watch it fade into a mound of thin stems and nothing. That happens because of one specific mistake, not cutting it back at the right moment. When the initial flush of flowers starts to look spent, not completely dead, but past peak, most gardeners leave it alone because it still looks okay. That is exactly wrong. The variety you want is Coreopsis Moonbeam, and what Moonbeam will do when you cut it back by 1/3. The moment that first flush fades is push a second wave of bloom within 2 to 3 weeks that lasts straight through October, in zones 3 through 9, meaning everywhere from Minnesota down to the Gulf Coast. The biological reason it works is simple. The plant is trying to set seed, cut before it finishes, and it tries again. Moonbeam specifically stays compact, rarely flops, and produces softer pale yellow flowers rather than the harsh chrome yellow of the species. The variety name is the whole point here. Tickseed, in general, is fine. Moonbeam blooms June through October without complaint. Right. If you want to know about plants 5 through 7, which are genuinely unusual and which I think are the most important plants on this entire list, stay right here. This gets more specific and more useful as we go, and if a garden that is still blooming in October when your neighbors have completely given up sounds like something you want, subscribe now because we are just getting started. The second plant is one that almost everyone has grown wrong, including me for the first several years I had it in the ground. Salvia nemorosa, woodland sage. You have seen it. Purple spikes, upright habit, seems to peak in late spring and then sit there looking done for the rest of the season. And again, that is a cutting back problem, not a plant problem. The variety I want you to write down is Salvia Caradonna. Dark stems, deep violet purple flowers, and a bloom window that runs May through September in zones 4 through 8. That is southern Canada down through most of the American South minus the extreme heat zones. Here is the technique. When Caradonna finishes its first flush, cut the entire plant back by half. Not by 1/3, by half. It looks alarming. Do it anyway. Within 3 weeks, you will have a full second flush of bloom, and in a good year, you will get 1/3. Most garden centers sell May Night, which is also excellent but blooms slightly shorter. Caradonna has a longer window and those distinctive dark stems that look good even between bloom cycles. The biological engine here is the same. Interrupt seed set. The plant redirects energy toward reproductive effort, meaning more flowers. This is not complicated. Most gardeners just don't cut back hard enough because it feels wrong to cut something that looks reasonably healthy. Plants 3 and 4 are where this list starts earning its keep. Rudbeckia Goldsturm, Black-Eyed Susan, but the specific variety matters enormously here. Not the species, not whatever's in the mixed flat at the hardware store. Goldsturm was selected specifically for compact habit, uniform bloom time, and a flowering window that runs July through October in zones 3 through 9. 4 months. And when you plant it in full sun and leave it alone, no deadheading required, unlike most of the list. It covers itself in golden yellow flowers with dark centers and just keeps going. The one technique that transforms Goldsturm from good to extraordinary is planting it in groups of 3 or 5, never solo. The visual mass triggers a response in pollinators that fills the garden with activity, and the plants themselves seem to bloom more heavily when they're in competition with each other. The mistake most gardeners make is deadheading it the way they deadhead everything else. Don't. Let the seed heads form in fall. They feed birds straight through winter, and they look better than a cut-back stem. One purchase, decades of plants, because Goldsturm self-sows gently without becoming invasive. Tell me honestly in the comments, how many months out of the year is your garden actually at its best? And drop your zone or your state, because that changes which of these 7 matters most to you. I want to know. Echinacea Magnus, purple coneflower. And if you have ever grown coneflower and felt vaguely disappointed by it, you grew the wrong variety. The species droops. The petals reflex back at an angle that makes the plant look like it is perpetually wilting, even when it is perfectly healthy. Magnus's was selected specifically for horizontal petals. The flower holds flat and wide, the way a coneflower looks in every photograph you have ever admired. Bloom window, June through September in zones 3 through 9. The technique here is counterintuitive. Do not fertilize coneflower. This is a plant from the American prairie. It evolved on poor, dry soil. Give it rich soil or supplemental fertilizer, and it produces tall, floppy stems and fewer flowers. The biology is a stress response. Phosphorus-limited soil triggers higher flower production. Magnus, in poor, well-drained soil with full sun, will bloom for 4 months and self-sow into a colony that looks more intentional with every passing year. And the seed heads in winter are among the most beautiful things a garden can offer. Brown and architectural, holding snowfall, feeding goldfinches from October through February. Subscribe here if you have stayed this long, because what's coming in plants 6 and 7 is genuinely unusual, and I do not think most gardeners have ever grown either of them. Agastache Blue Fortune, Hyssop, and this is where the list gets into territory that most garden centers are not going to help you find. Blue Fortune is a hybrid between 2 species, which means it has a bloom window that neither parent achieves alone. July through hard frost in zones 5 through 9, coastal Maine down through central Texas. 5 months. The flowers are blue-purple spikes that butterflies treat like a landing strip, and the plant itself smells like licorice, which deer find repellent. That is a meaningful bonus in any garden where deer are a problem. The technique. Cut Blue Fortune back by 1/3 in late June before it flowers to encourage a bushier habit and a longer bloom period. If you let it get leggy and then cut it, the recovery takes longer. Cut it early while it is still vegetative, and it branches heavily and blooms from mid-July straight into November in mild falls. This is not a plant you will find at every garden center. Order it from a specialty perennial nursery and plant it once. It comes back reliably through Zone 5 winters, meaning most of the American Midwest and Northeast, and gets larger and more floriferous every year. The 6th plant is Persicaria Firetail, mountain fleece, and if you have never heard of it, that is exactly my point. This plant blooms from June through hard frost. That is 5 months in most of the country. Produces long, narrow red flower spikes on a plant that is completely bulletproof in zones 4 through 8, which is nearly the entire continental United States. It tolerates part shade, which almost nothing else on this list will do. It tolerates wet soil. It tolerates neglect in a way that seems almost aggressive. And the flowers are a deep, warm red that intensifies as temperatures drop in fall. So when everything else is finishing, Firetail looks better than it did in June. The technique is division every 3 to 4 years, and the reason you want to do it is not because the plant requires it, it doesn't, but because each division becomes a new plant with the same June through frost bloom window, and you can spread that color across the entire garden for free. And the 7th plant, the one that stops visitors, the one that makes the garden look like someone who knows exactly what they are doing, planted it, is Tricertis Miyazaki, the toad lily. This is a woodland perennial, part shade to full shade, zones 4 through 8, and it blooms from August through October, which means it is doing its best work precisely when every other plant in a normal garden is finished. The flowers are orchid-like, white with purple spotting, intricate, and completely unlike anything else you can grow in a temperate garden. Miyazaki is the variety with the clearest spotting pattern and the most reliable fall performance. The technique is simple. Give it moisture-retentive soil with organic matter, side it in shade, and leave it alone. The mistake is treating it like a sun perennial. In too much light, the foliage scorches and the bloom window shortens dramatically. In the right spot, Tricertis Miyazaki blooms in September when your garden has nothing else happening, and visitors will stop and ask you what it is, every single time. So there are your 7 Coreopsis Moonbeam, Salvia Caradonna, Rudbeckia Goldsturm, Echinacea Magnus, Agastache Blue Fortune, Persicaria Firetail, Tricertis Miyazaki. 1 purchase each. All of them coming back every year, most of them getting better every year, collectively covering the bloom window from June straight through the first hard frost. This is not luck. This is not advanced horticulture. This is a plant selection problem that you now have the solution to. Subscribe if you want the rest of this, because there is a version of this conversation about spring perennials and a version about shade gardens, and a version about the specific techniques that make each of these plants perform better than the label on the pot will ever tell you. And drop your zone in the comments. Tell me which of these 7 you are adding first, and tell me honestly, has your fall garden ever been as good as your spring garden? Because this year, with these 7 plants in the ground, it absolutely is about to be. That is not optimism. That is just the right plants, finally in the right places, doing exactly what they were always going to do.